And we are live. Welcome to the MLB Strategy Show. It is Tuesday, September 7th. I am Josh Engleman. I am joined by Adam Scherer. At least today I am. Yesterday, not so much. We are here to break down a 12-game MLB slate. Tons to talk about. I'm out of breath. I just ran up the steps, and I know that shouldn't make me out of breath, but I've done things already today. It's not like I'm just out of breath because it's the stairs. Either way, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live, and shout out to Jock Market for being the presenting sponsor of this show. Adam, how'd it go for you this weekend and yesterday since we didn't get a chance to talk?
The same. Nothing exciting. Didn't win anything. Had a nice relaxing day yesterday once I misread the schedule and took off work. So yeah, I don't know. Glad to be back.
Did you play MMA by any chance?
Yeah. It didn't go well. I don't remember what went wrong, but it didn't go well.
Yeah, I took a beating too. So I knew we hadn't talked about it, and I was just curious now thinking about it. 12 games today. Doesn't look like we're going to have any weather issues or anything. And if you're interested, there is the happy hour slate on DK today. You can play a little bit earlier, 9 gamers starting at 6:35, but we're going to be looking at the main slate, all 12 games. We've got plenty to talk about. I don't have much else to add, so I'm ready to dive in if you are.
Yep.
Light chat right now too. I guess people not ready for the 9:45 start, but morning to Hugo, morning to Stephen Leibowitz. Good to see you guys. We're kicking it off with Adam's team, the Baltimore Orioles, 4.9 run implied total against the Kansas City Royals, Alex Wells and Jackson Kowar. And I think we're going to have to talk about this one at least a little bit. Are you interested in going up against your Baltimore Orioles? I didn't get to much Wells on my crunch at 5K. I did get to a bit more Kowar. I don't know how to properly enunciate that name. We'll go with Kowar. 5,300 did show up quite a bit as a pay down option. Do you have any interest?
Yeah, I think it's Kowar. I looked it up last time and I've already forgotten what it was, but I think that's what it was. But yeah, I think that at that price tag, it's certainly reasonable. It's not like it's the easiest matchup against Baltimore. The game is in Camden Yards, which is a downgrade. They have a 5 implied run total. The risk is obviously there, but Jackson Kowar did put up good strikeout numbers in the minors. He is only 5,300. He should, I think, be able to go relatively deep into this game if he's pitching well. So it kind of will just come down to, like, I'm not going out of my way to get him into lineups like, oh, I think this is a great play. You know, what can go wrong? But if you do need to save salary and pay down a pitcher, I do think he's underpriced for his upside.
You got me right on my sip. Yeah, he's my preferred pay down option, at least as of right now. Decent strikeout matchup for today against Baltimore. He's an okay strikeout pitcher based on Steamer projections. He just seems like basically average and expected to get 5 innings, and I'm willing to take that.
94 pitches last time out.
Yeah, 5 innings, certainly upside to go deeper, and 5,300 works for me. So
34,
barring any ridiculous ownership, I think it'll look okay.
Yeah, 34% strikeout percentage at AAA this year.
That'll help. It makes me feel even better about it because that's not at all how, like, he's 22% in Steamer. So It makes me feel even better about it. You'd rather have it trending that way than the other way. That's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Especially it's so difficult. I mean, I know we've kind of talked about it before, but like, I think it's so difficult when these guys get called up to, like, obviously, like, the projection systems are better than nothing, but with how much technology is being used in baseball now and pitchers are just changing things constantly. Like, I think it's so hard to take, you know, to factor in, like, oh, this guy did this in rookie ball 3 years ago. Oh, but now he's striking out 34% of guys at AAA. Like, I kind of just lean towards he probably figured something out.
Who was our example from, like, Thursday or Friday of last week?
Tristan McKenzie.
Yeah. Is that who it was? Yeah.
Tristan McKenzie was the one where everything on FanGraphs just seemed to be talking about someone else.
Yeah. And that's super relevant. You got to be on your toes. You want to be there before the information than after. You want to be right either way on your assessments, but it's more valuable to you in DFS to be ahead of the curve than behind it. You don't want to be playing catch up at all. Alex Wells, I can't justify in any way today. Can you?
No, like, the only possible justification, actually, is even in the player pool in DraftKings.
He is. He's 5K.
Unless
there's another Alex Wells that pulls up.
It's him. The justification would be he's 5K, but in that case, just go to Jackson Kowar, I think.
Okay, we're on the same page then. Let's talk a little bit about offense. I was a little surprised to see this. We'll dig into it. I think I know why most of it's happening. I have the Royals as my number 2 stack as of right now. I think Mondesi being 4,400 with third base shortstop eligibility is helping that one out tremendously. Salvador Perez at 5,800 is just nuking the ball right now. Also looking good. Wells projects with a 557 FIP via steamer. I think the Baltimore Orioles bullpen also projects for a 557 FIP via steamer.
That's probably being nice.
Yeah. So I love the Royals. I don't know what this ownership is going to look like. Surely Perez will be pretty heavily owned. I think Mondesi will also, Mondesi, I should say it like that, old school. Anyway, I think he's going to pull some ownership too, given the price tag and the eligibility. But for right now, barring any additional ownership, Kansas City at least ranks as my number 2 team.
Yeah, I think they look really good. And I do assume that they'll pull ownership. Perez always going to be one of the top catching options. Do you know how many home runs he has this year?
Definitely between 0 and whatever the record is, which I think is 70 something. So let's go 31.
He hit his 40th yesterday.
Yeah, I don't know shit.
Or the day before or something.
31 feels like a decent guess, but I mean, like it wasn't going to be 2.
Right, yeah. But he has like the same number of home runs as Vlad Guerrero, which is just like insane. Like I knew he was having a good year. I just didn't realize he was having like that kind of a year. But either way, like Perez is going to get ownership. He's always one of the best catcher plays. Merrifield probably pulls some ownership, even though his price tag has come up a bit. But then you also get like the really cheap bats like Carlos Santana, Benintendi. You mentioned Mondesi. I think it's going to be a pretty easy team to stack, and I expect them to be popular. But I do think it's a good spot. Not really concerned about Alex Wells. And like you said, there is just always an advantage to stacking against teams like the Orioles, where once you get the starting pitcher out of the game, the fun's just starting, as opposed to, a lot of teams once the starter comes out, you're kind of done scoring.
We should talk about how ridiculous this is. So these are the top 4 guys in home runs. Well, we'll make it 5. It's kind of crazy that the 5th one is there. Ohtani leads it. He's played 135 games. Vlad Guerrero is in 3rd at 40. He's played 135 games. Marcus Semien is 4th, which I never would have expected. He played 136 games. It's crazy to me to see that Fernando Tatis also has 37 home runs. He's played 30 less games, which is crazy. But then we get to Salvador Perez, 41 dongs. He's played 136 games. He's the catcher.
They said on the broadcast he's missed 1 game this season.
He's played more games than Ohtani. We played more games than Vlad Guerrero. He's played the same as Marcus Semien. To catch all of those games?
No. He's been DHing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they just
a lot.
I mean, enough. Like they use a backup catcher, like to rest him. They just don't take him out of the lineup.
Okay, I want to see how many plate appearances he has as a DH, because even if it's like 100 games at catcher, that's still.
Oh yeah, he might be playing
being
first
out
too.
there every time.
I know he didn't catch it.
More often than not, if you're having an off day because you're not catching, you're not also in the lineup.
Yeah, they sit most guys.
Like he's not getting a break.
Yeah, he's the best hitter on the team.
All right, he's caught 100 he started 105 games at catcher. So that's still only like 30 DH spots. That's not crazy.
Yeah, or first base, whatever he was playing.
Yeah, either way, he's on the field. That's a crazy season for Salvador Perez.
Yep.
I mean, you got to figure he's on pace to have like one of the more legendary catcher seasons in the history of baseball.
He's only 31.
Where's he from?
Venezuela, I think. Yeah, Venezuela.
Okay. That's better than. I was going to say, like, it is also possible that he's 37.
Yeah, and Pujols is 55.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm glad we like the Royals. Do we like Baltimore? I have them 11th. And if Jackson Kawhi is pulling in the ownership that I think that he should be, I think that brings the Orioles a little bit more into play. Yeah,
agreed. A lot. Actually, I was going to say a lot with Baltimore. Depends on the ownership, but I think it's a pretty decent spot either way. It's summer and late summer in Camden Yards. The Orioles are really cheap. Kawhi is probably pretty decent, but we don't really know. He's made 3 major league starts, 4 total appearances, 11 total major league innings. So there's, still a decent chance he ends up not being very good. Steamer projects him for a 4.48 FIP. The Orioles also aren't very expensive. You have Mullins at 4,800, but then it drops off. Nobody else in the lineup, or in the projected lineup rather, is more expensive than $4,400 Mountcastle. So pretty easy team to get to. Unfortunately, DraftKings still has Mancini and Mountcastle only as first baseman, so that makes stacking it a little bit less appealing. But I think it's a pretty decent spot, and it just gets more appealing the more ownership that Kawhi gets.
I don't have anything else here. Like I said, I have Baltimore 11. I don't get the sense that they're going to be over-owned, and I think that they'll be interesting based on Kawhi's ownership. One way or the other, I'm going to like something. Either Kawhi is going to be under-owned for me, or his ownership is going to create more interest in the Baltimore Orioles. I don't have anything else.
Nope, me neither.
This one's going to be big, though. Yankees and Blue Jays. 5.3 run implied total for the Yanks, 3.5 for the Blue Jays. Garrett Cole and Steven Matz. Cole is 11-8 on DraftKings today, 11-3 on FanDuel. Meanwhile, Matt's 8,400. I didn't get to Matt's at all on DK. I got to Garrett Cole in 28% of my lineups. That is the third biggest number of anybody on the slate for me at this point. How are you managing Garrett Cole, which is certainly in a scary spot, but this strikes me as the kind of matchup where Garrett Cole's going to have 9 strikeouts, but give up 2 to 3 solo home runs.
Yeah, it's a really interesting spot because for one draft, this is the most aggressive DraftKings pricing we've had in a while on pitching. Yeah. Like normally we've been seeing, these ace pitchers at like 10-4. Now you have Cole at 11-8 in one of the worst matchups you can get. Not only because Toronto is a dangerous offense in terms of their production, but they don't strike out. And Cole clearly can just pile up strikeouts on his own, but it's just like a really dangerous matchup for someone to be suddenly priced $1,200 more expensive. So a lot will come down to the ownership there and also just roster construction, because when you look through the other top end pitching on the slate, there's nobody else that really stands out as better than Cole. I don't think. Everyone else has either salary concerns or matchup concerns as well. So it's really just going to come down to like, what type of bats can I get into my lineup? And do I just completely forego this top tier of pitching, or do I go up to Cole? So kind of hard to say right now, as far as where I expect to be on him. But I do think that even though he's expensive, he's still the number one pitcher in terms of talent, 35.4% strikeout percentage, higher than Blake Snell's second highest on the slate at 30.3% strikeout percentage. So Cole basically 5 points higher there. 2.73 xFIP is the best on the slate. He's a really, really good pitcher. You shouldn't shy away from rostering Cole as long as you like the rest of your lineup. It's just worth noting that this is really aggressive pricing in a tough spot.
And I would assume the more you like Cole, the more you'll end up getting to a Jackson Kawhi or something along those lines. So they're going to run hand in hand. Look, 11.8 is a big, big time price tag. I got him projected higher than anybody else on the slate. It shouldn't be surprising. He's the best pitcher on the slate. But that is a healthy price tag. I'm pretty happy. 28% feels about right for me. Like just on the surface, nothing too crazy. It can only get so high at that price tag given sort of what's around him too. So I don't really have much to add. Ownership will matter a little bit, but I don't think that he's going to be so overwhelmingly chalky that I find that I'm like massively under the field. It's going to be hard for me to see him going to like 35 plus today.
Yeah. Someone mentioned that Cole never hit value at 11.8. You really just can't think of baseball like that because hitters score in such a weird way. Like any hitter that hits a home run is going at least 5x. So it's not like you have to look at your pitchers and say, oh, I need 4x for my pitchers. Like, yeah, Cole's not scoring 44 points, but it's just about getting, 25 plus points from your pitcher, basically. You're going to have hitters of all price tiers that, massively destroy their salaries. So you can't look at it like it's basketball or something like that.
No, it's not as frequent of an opportunity, but a 5K pitcher can have the best score of the day and go for 35, 40 fantasy points. It has nothing to do with that can just happen. It's almost like you just want raw points. Garrett Cole happens to give you a better chance of having a high amount of raw points. You're just going to have to augment that with a cheaper stack, a cheaper SP2, something along those lines. But yeah, I have never thought about value in baseball once.
Yeah. I think about it in terms of like a pitcher reaching how likely are they to be like the top pitcher on the slate. But even if you're trying to create some sort of value metric where you're saying like, how likely is Garrett Cole to reach X amount of points compared to Jackson Kowar, you should really just be setting some sort of like cap where it's just like 25 points. I don't care what his price is. 25 points is 25 points. Instead of 5x plus 10 or whatever you use for NBA, it would be like 5x plus 10 or 25 max. It's just, it doesn't matter. You don't
plus 25 or something.
Right. Yeah. You don't need your 11K pitchers to be getting you 45 fantasy points.
No, it'd be great, but not necessary. All right. Do you have any interest in Max?
No. I think a pretty, mediocre average pitcher regardless. And then now you have him going up against this Yankees team. He's not priced down. He has about a 22% strikeout percentage this season, 4.02 xFIP. He's an okay pitcher, but just not something that seems necessary on this slate.
All righty. Well, let's talk a little bit about bats. I'm not surprised that they're not ranked a little bit higher for me, but I have the Yankees 8th. I don't know if it's just a price thing. I mean, you certainly run into those situations where you can't have Rizzo and Voit in the same spot. You know, you've got 3 aggressively expensive outfielders, although Gallo not aggressively expensive. They're also worth those price tags. But Matz is fine. Like, he's a perfectly acceptable pitcher on the opposite side. He's not like a total gas can. So while I like the Yankees, and I think there's certainly power upside and having individual Yankee bats feel good, they don't strike me as a stack that I'm going to get to a ton.
I think it's a pretty good spot for them. Like, Matz doesn't miss a lot of right-handed bats. 19.7% strikeout percentage against righties this year compared to 28.8% against lefties. He's been okay at limiting the production, 147 expected ISO, 317 expected WOBA. The Yankees are, I guess, pretty expensive too in terms of at least Judge and Stanton. Everyone else is pretty underpriced. But the 2 bats that I think you like the most, Judge and Stanton are priced up. Luke Voigt's too cheap. A lot will just come down to ownership here. Like, for example, if Kansas City is pulling more ownership than the Yankees, I'm going to prefer the Yankees because they just have so many hitters that are better than 8 hitters on Kansas City. Same goes, with the Orioles, teams that have implied run totals a little bit lower than New York. If the Yankees are, one of the highest owned teams on the slate, then sure, it's a 12-game slate. There's a lot of pretty good hitting spots. I'll get away from them. But this is just one spot where I don't think it's not as like much of a slam dunk spot where I'm just saying within reason, I don't really care what the ownership is. It's, to me, just a very neutral matchup against Matz where I would like to get there. I think the upside's really high, but I'm going to be paying a lot of attention to ownership because I think there's a lot of teams in similar spots.
I have no interest in the Blue Jays. It feels like I should. I just don't think they're going to show up. Do you have any interest in using Blue Jay one-offs?
Not really. Cole is allowing a little over a home run per 9 innings this year, if I remember correctly. 1.05 home runs per 9. So you could make the case to try it, especially with how expensive Cole is. If he just gives up like a 3-run home run, his start's kind of done from a fantasy standpoint. So you could make the case there. But again, with it being a 12-game slate, with there being so many good offensive spots, I don't think I end up really looking to Toronto, especially because that ownership or the salary on Cole is going to keep the ownership in check as well. So it's pretty unlikely you get, like a 50% on Cole or something like that.
Yeah. If he were 10-8, I think it opens it up a little bit more because he might be in the 40s at that point. All right, I don't have anything else for Yanks and Blue Jays.
No, me neither.
All righty. I have this sorted incorrectly, so give me 1 second. Nope, that's wrong too. All right, now we're good. Red Sox and Rays. 4.8 run implied total on both sides. It's Eduardo Rodriguez and Drew Rasmussen. And I didn't get to much of either guy. Erod at 8, Drew Rasmussen at 5%. Rasmussen is 7,300, but obviously a slightly difficult matchup against the Red Sox. Not as difficult as it normally is. Meanwhile, Erod, I got 8%. He's 9K. Rays offense is good. So I'm not likely to get to a ton from a pitching perspective. Are you seeing it differently?
No, I don't really think so. I think Rodriguez is good. And 9K is a very fair price tag on him. He has a 27.5% strikeout percentage this year, 3.44 xFIP. He certainly can go out there and give you a good start. But this game being in Fenway Park, facing a Rays team that's really dangerous, I'd feel a little bit better if this game were in Tropicana. I think that goes without saying, just a more difficult park to hit in. But 4.8 implied run total here for the Rays. If Rodriguez is pulling, virtually no ownership in tournaments, I think he makes sense as just a low-owned contrarian play if you need one. But I think it's going to be difficult to prioritize him just given the difficulty of the matchup.
Wow. Let's talk bats. I'm more on the Rays side. They are my number 6 stack overall. Red Sox are 20th, so I don't anticipate going to Boston, but we'll see about one-offs. But on the Rays side, Arozarena, Jordan Luplow, Franco, Diaz, obviously Cruz in the middle of all of that, multiple eligibilities. A lot of these Rays bats are either priced really appropriately or significantly cheaper than they should be given their power profile. So I kind of like getting to Tampa.
Yeah, it's one of those spots where I don't think it's super likely they do well, but I think the upside's still really high. You're getting a nice park shift for all the right-handed power in this lineup. And assuming that they're not going to pull that much ownership, like I think already we've talked about three teams, at least two. The Yankees and the Royals, I would say, definitely get more ownership than Tampa. The Orioles may. So I'm pretty comfortable, even without ownership projections yet, saying that Tampa Bay is not going to be, the highest owned team or anything like that. And as long as they're not, I do think it's interesting because, Rodriguez has done a good job of limiting power this year, but you just have so much of it here with the Rosarena, Franco, Cruz, Diaz, Luplow. Brandon Lau, by the way, don't sleep on him. Rodriguez this year has allowed a 224 expected ISO to lefties, only 116 to righties. And Brandon Lau over the last 3 seasons has a 197 expected ISO against left-handed pitching. So not someone that you're likely to single out. But if you're stacking Tampa, don't sleep on Lau just because it's a lefty-lefty matchup. He should most likely be really low owned as well. So I do just think it's a really high upside spot that I don't anticipate gets a ton of ownership.
Okay. Do you get to any Red Sox bats? I didn't get anybody more than 3%. That was Schwarber, Devers, and Verdugo. They look okay, but there's just not enough ownership going to Rasmussen. It just doesn't. I just feel like we're going to have better spots.
They're also really expensive, the guys that you would want at least. Devers is 6,200, Schwarber's 5,600, JD is 5K. Then it drops off. But yeah, I think it's one of those where, if I get to the Red Sox, I'm never upset because there is a lot of upside in that lineup. But, we've already talked now about we've talked about 6 offenses. We really like 4 of them. One of them is the Blue Jays, who you can kind of always make a case for. And then, we have the Red Sox here. So I just think it's one of those where it's if I get to some Red Sox, that's fine. But I think it's going to be difficult for me to prioritize them when I have to start, kind of just drawing a line somewhere on who I'm rostering.
Anything else here for you in this game?
Nope.
Big time schedule coming up today. 11 a.m. So after this show, NFL Strategy, Laffy, Ben, and Jordan V. The NFL season is here, everybody. Get ready. We also have an NFL Prize Picks show coming up at 12:30 with Eitan and Greg. Adam, you and I will be back at 4:45 for the MLB Deeper Dive. And then Eric and Greg will close it out with MLB Live Before Lock from 6 to 7. Plus, if you're looking for free content at Awesemo.com, you are in luck. MLB main slate ownership is free. I promise you, you should use it. It's going to help you out tremendously in terms of constructing your lineups. Look for the link from Nightbot or go directly to Awesemo.com to find it. Braves and Nats, 5.4 run implied total for the Braves, 3.6 for the Nats. Max Fried and Paulo Espino. I got to Fried in 10% of lineups, 8,600. This is an average-ish offense for the Nats. So feels like an okay spot to get to Fried and pretty realistic price tag.
Yeah, he kind of just stands out if you just scroll down the pitching list on DraftKings. He just kind of stands out in terms of, like you said, it's just a realistic price tag. That's about where he should be. The matchup isn't bad against Washington. It maybe not as good as it seemed like it was going to be after the trade deadline. They have hit a bit better than at least I expected them to, but yeah. Fried's also a pretty good pitcher, only a 3.8 implied run total here for the season. He's got a 24.3% strikeout percentage. One thing working against him a little bit is that it's going to be most likely a predominantly right-handed lineup for the Nats. That does hurt his strikeout numbers. He has a 23.4% strikeout percentage against righties compared to 27.3 against lefties, but he's held righties to a 292 expected WOBA, 130 expected ISO. I just think he looks like a good option where there's not a whole lot of pitchers around him in salary that offer the same combination of talent and reasonably good matchup.
I don't have much to add for Fried. Do you have any interest in a $6,400 Espino? I do not.
I don't either. He's had some good starts lately, but I still don't buy into him. And then on top of that, it's just a really tough matchup against the Braves.
All righty. Well, then let's talk about offense and that really tough matchup because I have the Atlanta Braves 4th overall. Soler continues to be underpriced. Travis d'Arnaud, 3,700 to buy a home run doesn't seem all that crazy. Ooh, sorry, a little coffee in the old throat. I like getting to Atlanta. This is at least a third team that we can reasonably get to pretty aggressively. Ownership's going to be really important. We're liking a lot of offenses out of these first 4 games.
Yeah, so far this is just setting up where it's one of those I like a lot of these teams. I'll just play whichever ones everyone else doesn't want to. And that's typically how I approach baseball anyway, but it does feel good. I obviously prefer it when it's I get to play really good teams that other people aren't playing instead of I get to play the Pirates today. Awesome. So yeah, I think the Braves do look good here. Like I said, Espino's had some decent starts lately that have been pretty frustrating for me because I stack against him often, but still, a lot of power in this Braves lineup. Overall this season, Espino's had major issues with right-handed power in particular. 265 expected ISO to righties, 346 expected WOBA, 175 expected ISO to lefties. So clearly, Freddie Freeman is a top option. But the fact that there's tons of right-handed power in this Braves lineup, there are some spots where that makes them not look quite as good, depending on who the pitcher is that they're facing. I don't think this is one of those spots. I think that it's just a good spot, really top to bottom for the Braves.
Love it. Love that we're on the same page here. Any sign of ownership yet? Nicked. Nats, it's not really for me. Obviously, Juan Soto works pretty much anytime. He's not going to pull any ownership in this lefty-lefty spot, but I'm also not going to be rostering 5-man Nats stacks today. Are you?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we've already talked about so many offenses we like. It just strikes me as a slate where it's going to be difficult to start throwing in, Nat stacks and stuff like that.
Yep. Well, I don't have anything else for Braves or Nats.
Nope, me neither.
Moving along. Do we have an official line on this game yet? This is going to be Cubs and Reds. Looks like we do. 9.5 total. Good to know. All right. 4.5 run implied total for the Cubs. 5.4 for the Reds. Adrian Sampson and Wade Miley. Sampson, I didn't get at all at 5K. Wade Miley, I got to 6% of a decent spot for him. Not really a great DFS option, but I think he kind of works at 8,200 given how bad this Cubs offense is. Although the 9.5 run implied total doesn't make it awesome. Do you anticipate getting to Miley in the mid tier?
I think, God, it's so tough to say that I think I'll get to Miley at 8,200, but just the way this slate shakes out, I think he ends up being one of the better mid-range pitchers to go to because the Cubs do strike out at a really high rate since the trade deadline, easily leading the league in strikeout percentage. And again, it just kind of goes back to when you scroll through these pitchers, there's not that many that you don't have, some sort of legitimate concern, whether it's they're overpriced or they have a tough matchup or whatever. So, Miley, I think, is one of the mid-range pitchers that looks pretty good, or at least, reasonably good. He's not a great strikeout pitcher, but he is okay in terms of overall run prevention. 4.06 xFIP this year, 0.79 home runs per 9, only an 18.3% strikeout percentage. If he's pulling ownership, so if Miley is getting more ownership than Max Fried, I would just rather go to Fried. But if we assume comparable, similar ownership between those two, I think I would not really have a really strong preference either way. I like Fried a little bit more just because I think he's a better pitcher, but I would just lean towards whichever of them is getting less ownership if you have to pick one.
Okay. Bats aren't really popping for me, and I thought Cincinnati would, but they're not. They are my number 9 stack. I actually have the Cubs 10th. To me, these teams are very equal. I don't know if it's just a price thing or the way that the order is distributed. I don't anticipate getting to all that much of either side. I want to get to Cincinnati because I think Adrian Sampson sucks, but I don't like Cincinnati as much as I thought I would. Either tell me I'm stupid or agree with me.
Well, I would mainly just love to know why there's a $2,900 hitter hitting second on a team with a 5.3 implied run total that has a 117 WRC plus, 351 WOBA, 213 ISO, and is $2,900. That doesn't make a whole lot.
By the way, he popped aggressively for me too.
Yeah, I would expect Tyler Naquin to be one of the highest owned hitters on the slate. He's going to be one of those guys that makes it easier to get to Garrett Cole or whoever your pay up pitcher is. Yeah, it's a spot where I think he's a great play. It's 10:15 in the morning, so I don't know for sure, but I would assume you have him in cash games. He's probably going to be more popular than he should in tournaments, just from the context of he's still a hitter. He's still relatively likely to score like 3 points and be 30% owned or something. But clearly, I think one of the best values on the slate. Outside of that, though, I think I'm pretty much with you. I don't think Sampson's likely to be very good. We haven't really seen him in the majors much recently. He was up with, was he on the Rangers years ago? And then went to, I think he was in the KBO. But he also isn't likely to go very deep into this game. Threw 32 pitches last time out, 37 the time before that. So it's likely to set up as a bullpen game as well, which is just typically not that appealing. So I think the Reds they're still okay. They're one of those teams where if they're not getting any ownership and I end up getting there, I think it's fine. But if I'm just looking and assuming that ownership is similar between these teams, I would have them behind a lot of the teams we've already talked about.
I actually got someone more than Naquin in this game. If Michael Hermosillo ends up hitting leadoff at the flat 2K for the Cubs, he is also going to fit the mold of cash game potential outfielders if you get 2K, basically anybody in the leadoff spot, they're going to look really good because they're projected for more plate appearances than anybody else. If he happened to be on the road where you can guarantee that ninth inning at bat, it's even bigger. So I do like Hermosillo on the Cubs side, but both of those guys standing out because their prices are just simply incorrect.
Yeah, Frank Schwindel also underpriced too.
Yeah, absolutely. But from a 5-man stack perspective, I don't get the sense I'm going to be on the Cubs or the Reds.
Yeah, the one caveat would be if Wade Miley's pulling a crazy amount of ownership, that is a spot I don't mind getting to the Cubs. Like I'd said, on a slate of this size with this many good hitting spots, it's going to be hard for me to start stacking against Garrett Cole or taking a not very good Nats offense against Max Fried. Wade Miley, though, I think is a little bit easier to make that case against because, again, he's not that good of a pitcher, but also you have really good pricing on the Cubs where, like you were saying, if Hermosillo is leading off, that's a really good value. Schwindel's underpriced. Wilson Contreras is a reasonably priced catcher. It's not a good offense, but the top part does still have some power and they're really, really cheap. So it would allow you to do some different things, pay up for pitcher, get, good one-offs. Either way, it's not a spot where I expect the Cubs to be close to my highest owned stack, but this is one where it's worth mentioning that Miley's ownership will play a factor for me.
Yes, it will. Brewers and Phillies. Ooh, and we have ownership. Ooh, that's a lot of Blake Snell and Zach Gallen, but I already knew that was coming. So, all right. So we have ownership. I'm just going to circle back and look just quickly at my main columns. Wow, the Orioles are pulling a ton of ownership. They have my second biggest negative leverage score. Is that? Oh yeah. Ooh, what is happening there? Let's just touch on that quickly. The Orioles are the chalk today.
Well, no, the Giants are the chalk.
The non-course chalk. That one was going to happen one way or the other. Wow, I did not expect that much Baltimore ownership. Jackson Cowher 5% owned, so I'd rather go to the pitching there than go to the Baltimore Oriole hitting. Royals are pulling some ownership. A lot of it's going to Mondesi and Perez, so I don't mind that stack. I think they're relatively neutral given the way that the ownership is hitting the team. Yankees, I have with a lot of positive leverage. Top Stack Tool agrees. No one higher than 4.5%. That would be Gleyber Torres in the Yankees lineup. So I think we're going to New York pretty aggressively. They're my number one leverage stack. Who else did we want to talk about?
So I mean, if the Braves, but if this ownership holds on the Yankees, they look fantastic. Yeah, I agree with you on Kansas City. They are one of those spots where, we talk about it. The Top Stack Tool gives you a good idea of, where you should be looking, but you do want to individually look at hitters too, because if you stack Kansas City, you're with 5 guys, like if you go Perez, Mondesi, and then basically someone other than Michael A. Taylor, you're still going to have a relatively low owned stack. You'll want to play, a contrarian pitcher or two with them, but it's not crazy amounts of ownership there. Baltimore, on the other hand, you're kind of just getting ownership going to the whole team. The one, slight exception is Mount Castle Mancini, because you can only roster one, but it's more difficult to get low owned hitters that you want from the Orioles than it is from the Royals.
God, crazy slate.
Atlanta also not pulling much ownership at all.
By the way, Cole 18% owned. I like that a lot. I'd like to be over that number.
It like right now it just makes a lot of sense in my head to go relatively low on Cole, low on Coar, who is matching up against one of the most popular offenses, and then be able to do whatever the hell I want.
Yep. Yankees bats obviously go well there. No ownership coming to Erod or Rasmussen. No ownership going to the Red Sox, which is fine. No ownership really going to the Rays. I don't mind attacking the top of that lineup. That does still work out for me. I have them as a positive leverage team. And then we just got done talking Braves and Nats. Max Fried is 35% owned. Holy shit. I mean, I got him to 10, man. I'm not even in the ballpark.
So, yeah, I mean, this is what I said. I like Fried a little bit more than I like Miley, and I do, but he's getting 5 times the ownership of Miley.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't. Like, I had Fried at 10%. I had Wade Miley at 6%. That ratio makes sense. You can tell me that I'm light a little bit on both guys if you want, but 10-6 Fried to Miley seems a lot more reasonable than 35-7. Yeah,
I mean, just even looking in this entire range, like James Caprillion against the White Sox getting 1/4 the ownership. It's not a good spot, but the ownership should just be more spread out amongst that group.
I got to more Caprillion than I did Fried.
Yeah, and like Gallen, I think is kind of on a little bit separate tier, and we'll talk about him. Like I think he really stands out of this group. Probably still over-owned at 40%, but I think he stands out a little bit more given the matchup. So I'm not really including him when I say the ownership should be pretty even amongst this group of guys. But I think from the Fried, Caprillion, Odorizzi, Miley, even Gilbert grouping, ownership should be pretty similar.
This is changing everything. By the way, Cubs and Reds, nothing really has changed for me. Naquin is the highest owned red. I don't really have a ton of interest in the stack. There's no real ownership coming into Miley, so that does make him a little bit more appealing. And but it's not enough that I want to go to the Cubs. All right. Brewers and Phillies, 4.4 run implied total for the Brewers, 4.3 for the Phils. Eric Lauer and Aaron Nola. No ownership going to Lauer. I don't really see it at 8,800. 11% ownership going to Aaron Nola at 10,600. I thought I would get there a little bit more, but it doesn't appear to be the greatest strikeout matchup in the world. Doesn't necessarily matter for Nola. I mean, he's still a strikeout pitcher, generally speaking. I got him in 9%, so I don't really have much to add. And if Garrett Cole is only going to be slightly more owned, I would just rather have a lot more Garrett Cole.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is I don't think it's going to be that easy to get to Nola either. I don't love the matchup here. The park isn't great for pitching. The Brewers do have some pretty decent hitters in their lineup. And Nola, we've talked about it before. I don't want to read too much into it, but he's been better at home for years now. And that is something that I think is worth noting when you're talking about pitchers, especially like in the case of Nola, who he's been good over that entire stretch. He's been on the same team the entire time. He just pitches better in Philly for whatever reason. So I think that is at least a little bit of a concern here. You do have a 4.3 implied run total on the Brewers, not exactly low. So it's a situation where if Cole were getting a lot more ownership in a dangerous matchup, I would like the Nola pivot. But as is, they're both low enough owned. I would typically just try and get the money for Cole if I'm paying up.
You and me both. That's the way to do it as far as I'm concerned. And I'm going to skip bats in this game. I think clear across the board. I got the Brewers 22nd. I have the Phillies 19th. No ownership coming into these teams, but I don't really want to attack it. Are you more interested in, I'm guessing, the Philly side if you're going anywhere?
No, not really. Nola, on this slate, don't really think I need to stack up against. He's only pulling 10% ownership. Had a ton of offense against him last time against the Nats, but that was like a 5-game slate where he was 50% owned or something. It's just a different slate here. So Milwaukee doesn't seem necessary. Lauer is just kind of a guy. 24% strikeout percentage against righties, 178 expected ISO. Certainly nothing wrong with going to guys like McCutchen or Real Muto or Segura. McCutchen in particular is really cheap, but in the context of the entire slate, I think it's just going to be difficult to get to a lot of Philly.
Okay. I don't have anything else here.
Nope.
That one was easy. I always like that. Promo code time, everybody. Use the promo code WR to get our fantasy football draft kit for season long and best ball. You still have 2 more days really to get into some best ball contests if you want, or maybe you haven't had your season long draft yet. Use the promo code WR. You get Draft Wingman, best ball rankings and stacking guide, a trade value chart, and more. Plus, up to a $35 credit for Underdog and FFPC leagues. You'll get this package for less than $10. It's 33% off for everything we have to offer for season long and best ball. You can see the link, or at least see the deal on the screen right now. Look for Nightbot to drop that link. It was like 6 or 7 messages ago. Go ahead and click that, and you'll be set up. Less than $10. It's a bargain. It's a bargain. Cardinals and Dodgers. 3.8 run implied total for the Cards, 5.1 for the Dodgers. J.A. Happ, and it looks like Mitch White is going to be the long man for the Dodgers. I am not rostering either pitcher. Are you?
I don't think so. White's salary has come up enough to 6,800. He threw 72 pitches last time out. August 18th, though, he threw 91 against Pittsburgh. That was the game where he went 7 1/3, scored 30 DraftKings points. If the matchup were a little bit better, I think I would be a little more interested in taking a shot on White. As is, I think it's pretty tough to get there just because the Cardinals don't strike out a ton. They're not a good offense, but they're not one that you're expecting White to just, kind of run over either. So if he were cheaper, I'd be more interested if the matchup were a little bit better. But as is, I think it's I'm going to find money for that mid-range of pitchers that we've already talked about, or I'm going to just take the savings and go to Coer.
Okay. I am interested in Dodgers bats, but they are one of my bigger negative leverage spots. I don't mind it too much given the way that the ownership is coming in. A lot of it is to the Turner brothers and Mookie Betts, but I'm willing to still target them because they are my number 3 overall stack today. Just got to be a little aware of where I'm going from a pitching perspective and to fill it out. How are you managing the Dodgers against J.A. Happ?
Yeah, same boat for me. I think that even though they are projected to be a little bit overowned, it's still close enough where I'm going to like the Dodgers just because they are one of the teams most likely to have success. It is a really good spot against Happ. And because of the way this slate shakes out, for one, we have a few pitchers pulling massive ownership. So if you just use other pitchers, that's one way you can be contrarian. You have one stack in particular in the Giants who, yeah, they're great, but they're pulling massive ownership here as well. So it kind of just ends up being like, for the most part, if you go to a offense that is not the Giants, it's not going to be that difficult to put together a good lineup. So I think that the Dodgers still look pretty good here. Happ, just not very good anymore. 229 expected ISO to righties this year. 191 expected ISO to lefties. Doesn't strike guys out. 364 expected WOBA to righties. And you've just got a lot of really good ones in this lineup for the Dodgers.
I don't have any cheap. They are really cheap. Obviously Pujols should be 2,700 at this point in time. But Corey Seager, unowned, 4,700 shortstop. Happily do that. Will Smith is a $4,200 catcher. Sign me up. Whatever Cody Bellinger is at this point in time, 3,200, I'll continue to take my chances. I don't know what he is, but I'll keep going there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's another team too, where I think you said it, but Trey Turner and Justin Turner pulling 18 and 16% ownership. Mookie's at 10. Everyone else is sub 10. So It's not, they are semi-popular, but not to the extent where I think it's going to make it hard for me to put together, quality lineups around them.
I know that I'm not putting together a lineup of Cardinals.
No, I don't really see much reason to get there. Dylan Carlson at 3,100, Tyler O'Neill at 3,600. I think both guys are pretty good values, but when comparing them to all these other teams, it's not a priority for me.
Astros and Mariners, 4.8 run implied total for the Astros, 3.8 for the Mariners. Jake Odorizzi and Logan Gilbert. We have Odorizzi 16% owned today. I got him in 4% of lineups at 7,500. I did not get to Logan Gilbert. I don't have as much Odorizzi as the public. Are you liking Jake Odorizzi more than I am?
I think he's fine. I don't think I like him as much as ownership projections do. It's one of those where I think he's fine in the sense you're going to need that price range in a lot of lineups. And I don't think there's a drastic difference in range of outcomes between Odorizzi and Fried and, whoever else, Miley, other guys in that range. So I understand him getting some ownership, but I don't think, I don't think he should be getting 2 times the ownership of Wade Miley. I don't think he should be getting 16 times the ownership of Logan Gilbert on the other side here. So getting to some Odorizzi makes sense. I would not anticipate having 16% though.
Yeah, I'm going to be basically not anywhere near Odorizzi. I'm not going to get to Logan Gilbert either, just because I think there's value in spots of better options of guys that still aren't getting any ownership. Do you have anything you want to add to Gilbert? Not
really. I've mentioned him a couple of times when we've talked about the pitcher ownership. I think he's underowned in the sense he's projected for 1% ownership and he has a better chance of success than that. I don't anticipate really getting to him though, just because like you said, there's going to be so many other spots I can use to differentiate my lineup that I probably get to before I start getting to an 8K Gilbert against the Astros. He has been good overall this season. He, as a rookie, he has a 26% strikeout percentage. This will be the third time he's faced Houston in his last 4 starts. That absolutely lit up the first time. Was better last time out, went 5 innings, 4 strikeouts, no runs, but it's still just obviously a really dangerous matchup against Houston. I think that I just end up getting to some other spots that are underowned before I get to Gilbert.
I respect Gilbert in this spot. In a way, I respect Odorizzi. I have the Astros 13th and the Mariners 15th, but these two teams are pulling no ownership whatsoever. I have the Astros as my 3rd best leverage stack. I don't know how much I get to, and I would like to see more ownership coming from Gilbert to make it better. But if I'm going to get shares of the Astros at no ownership, I think we say this pretty much every show. That feels pretty good.
Yeah, they feel pretty similar to Tampa Bay for me, where Tampa Bay is getting a little bit more ownership, but both teams have 4.8 implied drawn totals. They're both facing pitchers who, if the pitcher is on top of their game, the pitcher is going to have success. The stack is not, but the offense is just so talented where if they're if they get less than the A game from Logan Gilbert or Eduardo Rodriguez in the case of the Rays, they're going to be able to do damage, and they have so much upside throughout their lineup that they kind of are just always a little bit more likely to put up a massive score than a lot of other teams. So I never mind getting to Houston, but again, we've just talked about so many teams that we like already that I would be surprised if I get a lot.
Mariners bats are not a team that I anticipate getting to, but I think they're under-owned. I don't have anybody that I can just individually point out, but I think they're going to be too far down the overall list to get pulled up enough from the leverage. But again, no hitting ownership in this game is interesting to see.
Give me some Mitch Haniger.
That works.
218 expected ISO to righties for Odorizzi this year.
There might be a little bit of hitting ownership in this next game. Rockies and Giants, 4.8 run implied total for the Rocks. 6.7 for the Giants. It's Chichi Gonzalez, who we know sucked last week, and Logan Webb. Neither guy getting any ownership. I think you can make a small case to get some Webb today against Colorado. It's not going to be a fun spot, but he is not going to pull any ownership, and he is 9,500, so the price is mildly problematic. Quick thoughts on whether you want to get to Webb, because I know you're not getting to Chichi Gonzalez.
No, I mean, I agree with you, and someone in chat had mentioned it too. The $9,500 price tag is kind of expensive, but at the same time, it's so discounted off of Cole and Nola that it makes it somewhat appealing, because you're talking, an extra bat or two off of Garrett Cole. If you go with Webb, he's also works as a pivot off of a very popular Blake Snell. Same price range, 1/50th of the ownership, basically. The Rockies are better at home, both in terms of their production and their strikeout percentage. I think that's not surprising at all. But Webb has been really, really good this year. And, again, he's just not really he didn't get the price bump that a lot of these other pitchers did. He has a 27% strikeout percentage, 2.83 xFIP, 0.65 home runs per 9. He has just been really, really good. And I don't mind taking shots on him against the Rockies, especially. It's one of those where it's people aren't going to roster Logan Webb because he's facing a team in Coors Field, and that's scary. They're not going to roster the Rockies really either because they're facing Logan Webb. It's one of these sides probably ends up winning out. So, yeah, I don't mind getting the Webb as long as the ownership stays low.
Yeah. And look, just because you're in Coors, the Rockies don't have all that big of an expectation of runs here. It's no different than, there's a ton of teams that have 4.8 run implied totals on the slate. Don't overthink it here. Especially from an ownership perspective. Let's talk about that ownership.
Sorry.
Ooh, no, you're good. Go for it.
I'll say Webb also predominantly a sinker slider guy. That just plays better in Coors than other pitches.
The Giants are the chalkiest stack on the slate. It's not even in the ballpark of close. I'm rounding up. 30% of the aggregate ownership on this slate is going to the Giants. That's obviously correct in that they are the best team today. It's not close. They have more than double the top stack odds of the next closest team. That's where I have it as well. With that said, how do we want to approach that in a 12-game slate? Because they're separated from the pack, but holy shit, are they overowned?
Clearly the best spot to go to. They're also underpriced. I don't know why it's so hard for DraftKings to know when a team is playing in Coors Field, but Lamont Wade, $3,800. Tommy La Stella potentially leading off at $3,300. This team has an implied run total now over 7, and these guys are basically free. Brandon Belt is $4,500, arguably the best play on the slate, I think.
Yeah,
even Bryant at $5,300. That's what he should be in most parks. He needs to be 6K here or somewhere around there. So very, very clearly underpriced. I would think you probably have 5 Giants in cash, maybe 4, but I would think you're pretty much stacking the Giants in cash games here. In tournaments, though, you kind of just have to, I think, look at it, and you can still use these guys, but be using them in mixed in with low owned stacks elsewhere. If you're stacking, we talked about Houston at 1%. If you want to mix in some Giants, that's fine, I think, especially if you're using some lower owned pitching as well. But even with basically a 20% chance of being the top stack, being twice as likely as any other individual team, you're still talking about 80% of the time that this team isn't the top stack on the slate and that the field wins. So typically for me, I just end up spreading my exposure out, getting as much of the field as I can that, I think is reasonably likely to do well. And if the Giants score a bunch of runs, the thing is, it's always scary because it's a really, really good spot and the Giants are likely to have success. But if you stack the Giants a bunch here, the winning stack might be a Giant stack, but it was very, very, very unlikely to be yours because everyone stacked the Giants. Yep. Whereas if you go to these other teams and one of them ends up being the winning stack, it's just much more likely that yours is one of the best because there aren't nearly as many to compete with.
Yeah, it's a tricky spot. You're certainly using Giants. This is not a team you're going to be unowned to, but you got to be aware of it, aware of your 5-man, aware of your pitching combinations that go with them. I do think the Giants pair well with Logan Webb. Yep. I really like the idea of going to Webb plus the Giants bats, because at least you're starting to get a little bit different. Not as many people are going to be going to the Webb piece since everybody's going to have Blake Snell $300 cheaper than that. But if you're looking at this and thinking, I'm going Blake Snell, Zach Gallen, Giants, congratulations, you just built a cash lineup. I don't have anything else for Rockies and Giants. I don't have much to say about the Rockies. I don't really want to go to them.
No, me neither. I mean, there's always a case to be made for the Rockies when they're in cores getting 2% ownership. They are going a little bit under owned, but at the same time, there's just teams that I think are also in really good spots. And I mean, there's teams with higher implied run. There's a lot of teams with higher implied run totals than the Rockies too. So from an upside standpoint at low ownership, I think it's okay, but there's other teams I like more right now. I have a ton of respect for Logan Webb.
Time to give a shout out to Jock Market, the presenting sponsor of this show. If you haven't heard about them before, here you go. They've turned fantasy sports into a stock exchange. You can buy and sell shares of these players in real time for guaranteed payouts at the end of the night, whether that's NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA. You can make real money every hour, minute, and second of any match or game. Use a pregame IPO to pick up shares of your favorite players. And you can buy, sell, or hold during the game. You can just be sitting on your couch. Somebody hits a bomb. You could sell off your shares, lock in your profit immediately if you want. Or even better, you can short players now, which is incredibly fun. If you're a person like me who loves to see the demise of others, then you can short a bunch of players and be rewarded financially. It rarely feels better than that. Use the promo code Awesemo when you sign up. Get up to $50 of a bonus on your first deposit. This offer is only for the Awesemo community, so make sure you're using it. Again, Awesemo, AWESEMO. That's the promo code for a $50 bonus at Jock Market. 3 more games to go. Diamondbacks and Rangers. 4.7 run implied total for the Diamondbacks. 3.8 for the Rangers. Zach Allen, Spencer Howard. We're not rostering Spencer Howard to my knowledge, but I think we are getting to Gallen. I think he is more than properly owned at the 40% number, 7,900. This Rangers team is abysmal. I don't have anything else to say. I imagine I'm using Zach Allen in cash games. It'd be very hard for me to see it a different way. Although Snell and Fried, I guess, is probably going to be a pretty popular combination as well. But 7,900 for Gallen against the Rangers looks great.
Yeah, no real issues there. He's probably over-owned in the sense that if you could just if you had unlimited lineups and could just roster all these other pitchers, one or two of them probably beat Gallen just because that's kind of how baseball works. Yeah. But I think that when you consider it in the context of an entire lineup where often you're going to have low enough owned hitters or a low enough owned other pitcher where you're just really looking for the top projected guy to round out your lineup, I think Gallen just ends up being really, really useful there. He's got a higher strikeout percentage than Fried. He's got a higher strikeout percentage than Miley. He's got the highest strikeout percentage in his price range at 26.7%, 4.14 xFIP, 1.48 home runs per 9, but also facing a Texas offense that isn't good. He's at home in Arizona. I assume the roof will be closed because it's 105 degrees or something. So it's going to be a good spot to pitch. It's baseball. It can go sideways, but I just feel better about Gallen than anything else in this price range.
Likewise. I got the Diamondbacks 7th overall, 7th in leverage as well. So I like the idea of grabbing some Arizona here. Josh Van Meter is 2,400, second and third eligibility. They have 4 guys with MPEs on DK. That's always really helpful in order to construct your lineup. Josh Rojas in the leadoff spot also has it 3,900. So I'll happily get to some Arizona. It's not a team that I want to have a ton of, but they are very much part of my 5-man stack player pool.
Yeah, I think they're fine. Howard, he typically struggles the deeper he goes into a game, but we haven't seen Texas really letting him go deep in the games. So I think it's kind of 3 or 4 innings from Howard and then a bullpen game probably. The pricing on Arizona is nice. The one thing that I would kind of caution is that because of how inexpensive the Giants are, using a stack just because they're cheap might kind of put you on like, I mean, obviously not the same build because like you're stacking a team other than the Giants, but your roster construction may end up being really similar. And you're basically just saying like, oh, I need the Diamondbacks to outscore the Giants or something like that, which that kind of sucks. But, still at the same time, if they do, it's going to pay off well. It's just like, ideally I would just get to a like completely different construct where, like my pitching is different, my stack is more expensive or whatever. So that would be the one thing is like, if the Giants were priced up, it would make the Diamondbacks more appealing because you could just say like, oh, well, I'll get the pitchers that the Giant stacks can't get to. But it's like, no, the Giant stacks can still get to whatever pitching they want.
I don't have anything for Rangers bats unless you do.
Nope.
Perfect. 2 to go. Oakland A's, Chicago White Sox, 4.9 run implied total for Oakland. 4.4 for the White Sox. James Caprillion and Jimmy Lambert. No ownership going to Lambert. That's fine. 9% going to Caprillion. I think that's about right at 7,800. Not the best spot in the world, but there are some strikeouts here. I anticipate I get probably around 10% of Caprillion and I just move on. Do you have any other thoughts for Caprillion?
No, I agree with you. He like strikes me as a 150 max play, a guy that I'm probably not getting to in 3 max or maybe even in 20 max. He's good enough where if I'm playing 150 lineups, knowing that in a lot of those builds, I'm going to just want 2 of these mid-range pitchers. And again, thinking that there's not a really big difference in range of outcomes between most of them, he's just going to start getting mixed in. But, not somebody I would anticipate getting to in 3 max. It is a tough matchup against the White Sox. He's been pretty good overall this year. He has a 24.5% strikeout percentage. xFIP's a little elevated at 4.64, 1.57 home runs per 9, but he is pitching at home in Oakland. Good park to pitch in, cool weather, which, favors pitching as well. So I think he's fine. Again, just more so of, I see him getting into 150 max a lot easier than 3 max or 20 max.
Do you have anything you want to add for Lambert?
No.
I don't have anything that Oh, you're good.
No, I was going to say he last pitched in the majors August 1st through 57 pitches. I was pulling it up now to try and see what he was doing in the minors, but overall this year at AAA, 18 starts, 59 and 2/3 innings, did strike out 31.7% of hitters, but this is, I've said it before, I think Oakland and Toronto are probably my 2 least favorite offenses to try and take pitchers against. Just because they have so much power and they don't strike out a lot. Obviously, you can still get, the occasional big game. Robbie Ray just, lit them up 2 days ago, I guess it was. But Jimmy Lambert, not Robbie Ray.
Oakland bats are 16th for me. White Sox 12th. A little bit of leverage, though, positively for Chicago. It's not a spot that I'm really excited about. I would probably want a little bit more ownership to Caprillion, but I don't think that the White Sox are the craziest GPP stack in the world. They are showing up with some positive leverage, which is helpful, but a lot of teams are given the big negative leverage to Baltimore and the Giants. Are you planning on getting to bats on either side?
If I do, I'd get to the A's first. I mean, the park isn't great for hitting. I do think based on his numbers at AAA, Lambert's decent. Projects 4.57 FIP from Steamer, but there's just so many other offenses where Oakland kind of just falls into that same bucket with like the Astros, where I think that they are always a good stack when they're pulling 1% ownership, but there's also a lot of really good stacks today.
Yep. Well, that's all I got here. Want to close it out?
Yep.
This one's big. 4.9 run implied total for the Padres, 2.6 for the Angels. Blake Snell and Packy Naughton. The big story here is Packy Naughton. Just kidding. It's Blake Snell at 49% ownership, 9,200 on DK. I agree with it. This Angels offense is truly terrible. No Ohtani. So if that's the case, I am going to go to a lot of Blake Snell, which I assume means today is the day that he ejects for the first time in a while.
Yeah, I feel really similarly about Snell as I do about Gallen, where he's technically overowned. Like he has a 31% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. He's getting 49% ownership. If you start comparing him to other pitchers, you're going to see a bigger gap in ownership than in top 2 pitcher percentage, but you're not building your lineup just solely on trying to find the most underowned guys at every position. At some point you are trying to work in, upside and projection, guys that are likely to have success. And he just kind of stands out. He's at a price point where, mentioned it with Logan Webb. It's kind of a price point where there's not a whole lot else around it And, he's not pitching in Coors Field. He is facing a bad Angels lineup. He's not facing the Rays like Rodriguez is at 9K. He just really stands out as someone that's going to show up in a lot of lineups because he projects really, really well. There's not a lot of alternatives around him. And I have 9 other roster spots to use to be different.
Steamer strikeout rates for the 3, 4, 5, 6 core of the Angels, 29%, 30, 31, and 30. And by the way, just in case you're not aware, Blake Snell knows how to get strikeouts. So I don't have anything to add. You're playing him. First up, at least for me in a cash build, is going to be Gallen and Snell. We'll see where that actually ends up. But, you're going to do a lot worse than the 2 aggressive chalk pitchers that deserve it.
Yeah. I mean, while we were talking, I was just like from memory trying to build out a cash team. I still have second base, third base, and shortstop open, but I have $4,600 left per position with Snell, Gallen, Perez, Belt, Wade, Naquin, Hermosillo, which Hermosillo could get kicked to the curb at some point. But the point being I think those are the 2 cash pitchers. I think it's really easy to build a lineup around them.
Yeah. We're not rostering Angels bats, correct?
I don't think so. I've said it before, there are good GPP players that probably will because they just play even more contrarian than I do. I think if that's your strategy, that's fine. Understand the swings that are going to come with it. On a slate like this, I am more inclined to forego the leverage or the negative correlation that you get with Snell and just be getting some really low-owned teams in good spots.
Here's the big reason for me that I find it easier to not want to go to the Angels in a situation like this. We have San Francisco at the top with massive, massive negative leverage. We also have Baltimore with massive negative leverage. That leaves you all sorts of different teams you can get to that are already not pulling any ownership. You're getting the positive leverage elsewhere. You don't have to double down by flying into the face of one of the best pitching options on the slate. Blake Snell is not getting 49% ownership because he's accidentally 6,700. Like he's actually good. I don't need to target the actually good guy too.
Right. Yeah. This isn't one of those slates where it's like, oh, there's no good pitching, so we have to roster somebody. So everybody's going to play, Jake Odorizzi or something. Like this is the guy has the second highest strikeout percentage on the slate. He's really good. The Angels suck. And like you said, you can kind of just from like a macro viewpoint, when you have a few pitchers that look like clear top options, you have a couple of offenses getting massive amounts of ownership. It just makes sense. Typically what ends up happening for me is I play the pitchers that I want, and then I just spread out. Like I end up being pretty concentrated on pitching and then being really spread out across offenses that are not the really popular ones because, I don't need to have 25%. I don't need to choose like between like the Braves, the Rays, the Yankees, the A's, the Astros. I don't need to like choose one and say, oh, this is going to be it. It's like, no, I just want all of these teams at the expense of the Giants. I'm going to take the field offensively and hope that it works out.
Yeah, we're in the exact same spot here. We haven't touched on the final piece of this, but I do want to laugh at the fact that Laffy saw that you woke up today, which is fantastic. I got the Padres 5th overall and 4th in terms of leverage. Fernando Tatis in the leadoff spot is projected for 11% ownership, and then no one else is getting any ownership at all. I'm not entirely sure why. Well, I mean, I guess I know why San Diego's not pulling all that much ownership. It's because it's going to other places aggressively. But I don't care about Packy Naughton at all. I would like to roster the San Diego Padres.
Yeah, just another one of these teams where I think they individually aren't that likely to be the top stack. They have a 3.5% chance. It's like 1/8 of San Francisco. They are pulling a little bit of ownership, but I think, again, it's not going to be that difficult to just sort of spread my exposure out to a lot of these teams that have high ceilings. And most of the time, 1 or 2 of them are going to beat the Giants.
I have them much higher. I have them at 5.9% for being the top stack. And I hope that I see San Diego climb a little bit in our top stack tool. That seems a little underrepresented given the spot. Packy Naughton does not project well, at least via Steamer, but that's it. That's all I got right now. 12 games up, 12 games down.
Yeah, this seems like a fun tournament slate.
It really does. Let's sum it up. Favorite stacks for the day.
I guess right now, looking at the ownership, the Yankees, Tampa Bay. I'll throw Atlanta in there, even though they are projected to be a little bit overowned.
Yeah. Yankees, Rays, Padres, my 3 biggest positive leverage stacks. I'll happily get to some Royals and Braves because I think they're good spots that are at least neutrally owned. That's what we've got. Tell the people what you've got going on for the rest of the day.
Deep dive will be out in a couple of hours. Deeper dive at 4:45 with you.
Yes, with me. Correct. We got NFL coming up in 9 minutes. Don't go anywhere. I mean, it's going to be a different stream, but like, don't leave the channel at all. Just go to the actual stream. NFL Strategy Show coming up next. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Adam and I will see you again in a couple hours for the deeper dive. Good luck.